From the local station, News 4 Jax starts now.
We start here at 11 with a live look at the Georgia World Congress Center in Atlanta. As we speak, the votes have been counted for two critical races that will determine where our country goes in the Biden-Harris administration.
Checking the latest numbers in the runoff between Democrat Jon Ossoff and Republican incumbent David Perdue. With a little more than 80% of the precincts reporting, Perdue is leading with 51% of the vote. And in the other runoff between Democrat Raphael Warnock and incumbent Republican Kelly Loeffler, with 82% of the precincts reporting tonight, Loeffler is also leading with 51% of the vote. The leads have changed hands throughout the night with all the makings of a very close finish. News for Jax. We have a team of reporters in Georgia covering these races.
First, we're going to go to News for Jax reporter Vic Micolucci, who's at the Georgia World Congress Center in Atlanta. And Vic, there were a record number of mail-in ballots for the Senate runoffs.
And behind me, thousands of ballots for Fulton County voters. They mailed them in. These are absentee ballots. These are provisional ballots, as well as those coming from the military overseas. And I want to step out of the way and show you. First of all, we're going to go down there to that fenced area. That's where the ballots come in, either through the post office or through one of these drop-off locations that is all throughout Metro Atlanta. They take them out of the boxes, they open them up, and then they move them down that assembly line. Next stop over here, they open the envelopes. From there, they go through them, they make sure that they are ready, they verify the signature, and they make sure that they are legitimate. Finally, they're going to take the batches and they run them through the scanners here, which go into the computers. That's how the process works here in Fulton County, as well as all throughout the Peach State. And election officials say it is very safe. So we went through North Georgia today, talking to voters, making sure that they felt like their voices were heard and their votes were counted. And everybody on both sides of the aisle, Republicans and Democrats that we spoke to, said it was a good scenario. They came through. The experience took them about 5 to 10 minutes, very little to no wait at all of these precincts, and they were satisfied. We also heard from Gabriel Sterling. He is the now famous head of the election system here in the state of Georgia, and he says this process likely will not end tonight.
We're going to start getting results on tonight. We're going to get the biggest bulk of them, like we did last night. It depends on the margin. When you want to get a final outcome, we will know the outstanding number of ballots. If I'm a betting person, which I'm not, I would say it's going to be a couple of days because I anticipate it'll be a close race one way or the other.
Fulton County is the most populated county in the state of Georgia, and right behind me is just one part of this counting process, because there is another facility, an elections warehouse, and that's where they're bringing in the computers from all of the day of voting at these hundreds of precincts all throughout the city. They're doing that here and, of course, in every county in the state of Georgia. Hopefully we get some results early in the morning, but as you heard there from the elections manager, it could be well into the end of this week, possibly the weekend, until we find out exactly who won these two runoffs. Of course, we'll keep you posted. For now, we're live in Atlanta. Vic Micolucci, Channel 4, the local station.
All right, thank you, Vic. And as the entire country eagerly awaits those results, issues remain at the forefront of people's mind. Taxes, healthcare, police funding, fighting the pandemic. They're all topics that are weighing heavy on voters as we move into a new presidential administration. News for Jax reporter Scott Johnson is joining us live in Southeast Georgia tonight. And Scott, I understand you've been talking to voters on both sides about why these races are so critical to them.
And these are races that these voters could not get away from. Pretty much everywhere you go, you see campaign signs like these. The airwaves have been flooded in these two Senate races as the eyes of the nation focus on Georgia. A steady stream of voters in Southeast Georgia. For instance, in Glenn County, election officials were expecting a 52% turnout, high for a runoff election where the president is not on the ballot. What has this one been like compared to other runoff elections? Just different?
Not even close. It's a lot more interest, a lot more participation.
A big question on the Republican side involves whether there's enough voter enthusiasm in spite of claims of fraud in Georgia by President Trump during the November election. State Republican leaders have faced criticism. In the AP VoteCast survey of voters, among those who voted for Republican David Perdue, 57% approve of how Georgia Governor Brian Kemp handled the results of the November election. But 42% disapprove in his own party. Still, in talking to Republican voters, they tell me they still showed up.
if we can control the Senate, then we got a chance, especially with the crap that went on with Trump and all that. Then it was a mess. It's still a mess.
And do you think Republicans still came out to vote despite of all that?
Yes.
Or? You do?
Oh, yeah.
In the AP VoteCast survey, among those who voted for Democrat Jon Ossoff, 44% approve of Kemp's handling of the election results to 54% who disapprove. Georgia Democrat Molly Knowlton tells me she wants Loeffler and Perdue out of the Senate.
And I think it's really important that we have a change. We currently have two senators who really have nothing in common with the people who live, especially down here in southeast Georgia. And David Perdue lives, as a crow flies, 2 miles from my house. And in the 12 years I've lived in this community, I've never seen him.
And while there was talk on the Republican side of whether or not there was apathy because of allegations of fraud in the November election, and talking to some, they say that was kind of overwhelmed by the sheer influx of campaign ads they saw that really did impact a lot of voters' minds on whether or not they should vote. We're live in Southeast Georgia. Scott Johnson, Channel 4, the local station.
All right, Scott, thank you. Folks, we want you to hear perspective on the outcome so far of tonight's critical races from two political experts joining us. News4JAX political analyst Rick Mullaney from JU's Public Policy Institute, and the Reverend John Newman, a political advisor to both Democrats and Republicans all throughout his career.
Yeah, John, Rick, some believe that what happens tonight could help set the course of politics for the next decade as both parties decide whether to double down on those trends that define the Trump era or try something different. Rick, if we start with you, are we seeing that answered tonight?
Well, I don't know if we'll know the answer tonight. I think we're going to have the final results by noon tomorrow. But Kent, this is the fork in the road. Tonight's is very, very consequential in terms of the policy direction of the country and in terms of the politics of the country. Make no mistake, whoever has the majority, particularly with the Democrats, who now have control of the House, the Senate, and the presidency, if it's one-party rule, it's a very significant difference for policy and a very significant difference for politics. The Republicans, on the other hand, it would be divided government. So tonight, we will know within a few hours, probably early tomorrow, which direction we're heading, but it is historic, it is the fork in the road, and it has traumatic consequences for the future of the country in terms of both policy and politics.
Well, John, let's start with you with this question. Almost $500 million has been spent on TV, radio, and digital advertising since November alone, easily making this the most expensive Senate race in history. Both Biden, outgoing President Donald Trump, campaigned in the state Monday. All of this is not just happening because it's the only race going on in the nation right now. The balance of power is important.
Absolutely it is. And I'm not surprised of all the money that's been spent. This was anticipated because it really does come down to, as Rick was saying, the direction of the country. But I think what you've also seen is a precursor to a couple of other things. You're seeing eventually there's going to be some kind of cataclysmic, I expect, result in terms of what happens with the Republican Party. The mainstream Republicans versus what some call the Trumplicans. Oil and water, the two do not mix. That's going to at some point come to the fore. The second thing is you've seen a tectonic political shift. No one would have ever thought that Georgia twice would be coming down to the wire. That's suggesting that there is a political reality that's been taking place, even like in Texas. We saw it in Arizona, places that have been traditionally Republican. Now you're seeing that things really demographically have changed to the degree that the politics will never be the same again in this country.
John and Rick, I want to hear from each of you. You give me 30 seconds. But historically, it's been harder for Democrats to get minorities to turn out in a non-presidential election. How critical, John, is the black vote in what happens tonight and what ends up being the balance of power in the country?
Well, the truth be told, as far as the African-American community and the Democratic Party, we've always been not just the included party in terms of the body politic, but oftentimes the margin of victory. And what I think has happened is back in the last decade or so, the Koch brothers went to getting the more granular votes, city councils and legislatures and governorships. Now you see the African-American and Democratic Party working together to change that dynamic to where now getting out the vote and the more granular approach is what's happening within the Democrats and the African-American community.
All right, I have one more question for you. Rick, we'll go with you. Some researchers, they said Republicans didn't trust the process. A lot of criticism and accusations made about the entire election process. Are you surprised that it doesn't seem to have dampened Republican turnout in this runoff?
I actually think we have to wait for those vote totals to see what that looks like. Remember, in November, there were 5 million votes with the 12,000 vote margin for Joe Biden. Right now, it appears we may be in that 4 million range. But what the Republicans really needed to be successful was to be unified and focused on this race. The Democrats very much so and got out to a very quick start. And so therefore, as we look at some of the totals coming in, see whether or not what that turnout really looks like. As John just mentioned, the black vote is critically important. It may make the difference. For the Republicans, they need to turn out their base, and they need to have a big turnout. Particularly today, look for those important numbers on Election Day. If you turn out 800,000 to 1 million on Election Day, that is pro-Republican. Really important to see how that turns out. So, Joy, in the end, this is all about turnout. Did the Republicans turn out their vote? Did the Democrats turn out their vote? And did that division dampen some of that turnout? Because this is really, really close. So if you dampen it even a little bit, it could be the margin of victory.
John Newman and Rick Mullaney, you turned out for our elections coverage in November, and now tonight we appreciate your insights so much. Thank you.
All right, viewers, folks, stay with us. We are back after this quick break.